Good evening and welcome, everybody, to another episode of Commanders Gridiron. I'm your host, Steve Lockman, where we talk everything Washington Commanders football on and off the field. It's been an exciting 3 weeks since we've had our last episode here at Commanders Gridiron. And as we know, we've jumped into wholeheartedly with both feet into the middle of the free agency period with the start of the NFL season that kicked off on March 15th. And as you know, the Washington Commanders spent no time whatsoever trying to shore up a bunch of positions, get some free agents, short-term, long-term deals, etc. But as always, as we always kind of start on the show, we kind of talk about some off-the-field stuff. Usually, what's in the news, ownership, stadium, whatever. It's kind of how we kick off the show here. Hey, Eileen, thanks for checking in tonight. Appreciate it. Thank you for all of you that are tuning in again, returning. And for all of you newcomers listening or watching the show tonight, greatly appreciated. And like I said, as we start off the show, I kind of always look for something that's kind of off the field, in the news type deal. And with the Washington Commanders being in the DC market, there's always no shortage of news whatsoever, right? And it was kind of interesting that in a publication called Essentially Sports, a publication I never really heard of before, but it was a really interesting article that actually came out about billionaire Magic Johnson and the process of how the ownership group, along with general manager Adam Peters, basically got to Dan Quinn, hiring as the new Commanders head coach for this season. Since the new ownership group effectively as their first full season here in DC, they kind of knew that, look, Ron Rivera was the lame duck last year, short of him making the playoffs and even going maybe even into a deep playoff run, as opposed to just making the playoffs. We kind of always knew that Ron Rivera's days were numbered in DC. And it was no surprise when he was let go on Black Monday in January of this year, which kind of opened up the floodgates for the coaching vacancy here in DC, as well as coaching candidates, right? And we all knew who the top candidates were for this offseason: Jim Harbaugh from the University of Michigan, Mike Macdonald, Ben Johnson from the Lions, and, ultimately our team of management and owners settled on Dan Quinn. And what really struck out to me kind of in this article was that, Dan Quinn found his new home in February of 2024 after he became the Washington Commanders' 31st head coach. Kind of shocking, but not really, because, it's kind of funny that when we look over the last 24 years of Dan Snyder's ownership, I mean, Dan Snyder probably went through every bit of 20 NFL coaches without looking at the list, but it's so interesting that, looking at when I was a kid, you had basically Joe Gibbs era, all the way up through the Super Bowl, in 91, the last Super Bowl that they won, 91-92, when they beat the Buffalo Bills. Then you look at, Richie Pettibone came in for a year or two. Then they hired somebody else. Then Dan Snyder took over ownership in 94. And that's kind of when the coaching carousel just continued. So you had the likes of Steve Spurrier and Marty Schottenheimer and Jim Zorn and Mike Shanahan and Jay Gruden. And, the list goes on and on. But, so Dan Quinn comes in as our team's 31st head coach. And as I alluded to earlier, in the search for the new head coach, all those big names popped up: Johnson, McDonald, even Raheem Morris had ties because he was a former coach here in DC. However, whether it's a PR thing or whether he was actually the guy from the beginning, just because of how thorough and lengthy the process was going, they kind of always tabbed Dan Quinn as the guy that they wanted. I kind of believe that 50-50, right? So, the media had the odds-on favorite of Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator of Detroit, being the head coach here at DC. However, I'm not 100% convinced yet from what I've read and, some of the tweets that I've seen and some of the inside team sources that was always the case, right? So the more this kind of goes along and the more you kind of hear and see from Peters and kind of in this article with Magic Johnson, one of the managing partners, minority owners of the Washington Commanders, kind of seems like Quinn was number one, number two on their radar the whole time. So, that's kind of what Magic Johnson alludes to in the article, right? And, he talked about the rivalry between the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington Commanders, basically going back, even to the days of the Washington Redskins and just how great that rivalry was. And as Magic Johnson said, it's one of the greatest rivalries in sports, and even as for the Philadelphia Eagles, who's one of our divisional opponents, their rivalry with the Commanders isn't any less fierce. Let's be honest, the Cowboys and the Eagles are kind of right up there, not only being divisional foes, but just kind of being one of those marquee NFL rivalries, when you look at the great matchups in NFL on an annual basis. So, look, he's like, having Dan Quinn and selecting Dan Quinn as well as what they're doing with the roster and Adam Peters is going to help put us in position to what they believe is kind of regain some stature and standing in the NFC East. So, look, he said on praising Quinn, we're excited because Coach Quinn has been a head coaching in the league before. He took the Falcons to the Super Bowls, remember, even though they lost. And, he's done an amazing job with the Cowboys as their defensive coordinator. Also did an amazing job as defensive coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks when he was out there under Pete Carroll. So we know what he brings to the table. We know he knows how to coach. We need an outstanding leader. We got one in Coach Quinn. Now he's put together an amazing staff, which I wholeheartedly believe. We talked about it on the last episode of Commander's Gridiron, all the people that he brought in, from offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, all the position coaches that have tremendous experience either as former head coaches in the NFL or have been part of Super Bowl winning teams at other teams and stints in their NFL careers. So it'll be interesting to see how, they all come together to make our team a whole lot better, right? He goes, you got two teams in our division that we're trying to catch, and that's the Eagles and the Cowboys, right? No offense to the New York Giants. And so we got to take steps to do that and build our team the right way. Johnson further goes along and says, hey, look, after the Commanders hired Quinn went and hired respectable names in the NFL to help the franchise achieve just what Magic Johnson, had laid out, right? The new defensive coordinator, Joe Witt, followed him from the Cowboys. They took Cliff Kingsbury, jumped ship from the Arizona Cardinals, basically kind of like in that hiatus, non-coaching spot, in the time being since his time in Arizona. And other notable names like Bobby Johnson, Larry Izzo, and Anthony Lynn to help was just even more evidence to kind of prove Magic Johnson's point of the staff that we're hiring. And for the Lakers legend, Magic Johnson, there's no better person than Dan Quinn for the job. Given last season's performance at 4-13, they're obviously looking for a bounce back season. And, something that the Commanders will overlook is last season's record, kind of as they take on their competitors for this year. New team, as we go over here shortly in tonight's episode, we're going to look at the vast turnover of free agents that we had, the free agents that we signed in this period, and kind of keep going on and on, right? So it's just a matter of, hopefully that Quinn can live up to those expectations and kind of be the coach that everybody wants him to be. And, we put together just a really good product on the field that our fans and, even the players just aren't used to from the days of Ron Rivera. We talked about on this show, they talk about it in the media, they talk about it like anywhere and everywhere that, just having the players was kind of interesting because Ron Rivera always said, hey, look, our team is assembled. This is our team. This is our roster. This is what we're putting out on the field. But all the fans, all the DC media, everybody kind of knew that we're just not good enough. And, whether it was players that didn't want to come to DC because of Snyder, because of salary cap issues at the time, because, ownership doesn't want to put the money into signing bonuses, blah, 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 blah. Whether it's the culture here, whether it's the investigations, the list goes on and on. We just weren't getting the better players that, miraculously, once we go out this year with, a new GM, new defined ownership, the head coach and the coaching staff here, lo and behold, like, we're signing some decent free agents. Yes, some of them are at the kind of on the back end of their career. Some of them are young guys. Some of them are proven guys. Some of them are just strictly for depth. And we're going to talk about all that tonight here at Commanders Gridiron. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But, kind of moving on from Magic Johnson and, how they talked about Dan Quinn, the question is, well, how did we get where we are with free agency? We know that since our last episode, free agency was about to start in 1 or 2 days. Actually, I think the day after our last episode. So how do we get to where we are for free agency and kind of set ourselves up for this year's new league year off season, so to speak, right? Well, it's kind of a couple fold. So first off, we didn't really spend a whole lot of money last year. Part of that was because of the ownership change in Dan Snyder to Josh Harrison Company. We knew that Dan Snyder wasn't going to spend a lot of money on free agents. We knew Dan Snyder wasn't going to spend money on the signing bonuses, guaranteed money, because that means money out of him to put it into escrow, right? Per league rules. We know that the culture was significantly less and declined from the last 3 to 4 seasons and beyond, compared to where it was going into this season. So, we had racked up a substantial amount of salary cap space. Actually went into this year's free agent frenzy, as I call it, with about $90 to $93 million. A lot of draft capital, picked up some more along the way. And, it'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of April on draft weekend. So between the draft capital, between the ample, which is actually, I think, number 2 in salary cap space for the free agency period that we were going into, it kind of just gives Adam Peters and company just that much more firepower going into the free agency to see where we can fill some holes, what we can do with that, and where we can go. Hey, Joe, as Joe Sullivan says, there ain't truth to the JJ McCarthy rumors. So it's funny you bring that up. Everything I've been reading, it's interesting on a couple levels, right? I don't think there's anything to JJ McCarthy coming to DC. I'm not 100% sold that JJ McCarthy is the best fit in Kingsbury's system. Now, that's not to say that, crazy stuff has happened before on draft day and my team wouldn't select him at number 2. However, I feel that, no matter what train you're on, there's at least 3 quarterbacks, that are better than McCarthy going into this year's draft. Obviously, we know Caleb Williams is more than likely going to go number 1 to the Bears, which then brings up the Commanders at number 2. Before we get into the details of McCarthy, I don't see us trading out of number 2. They're going to field the phone calls. They're going to see what the offers are. Look, any team that says they don't make a phone call about even the possibility of trading up into the top 5 or much less the top 3 is flat out lying. Every team does it every year. Most of them admit it. Most of them don't. They won't even say, put a package together for it, but they'll call and be like, hey, what's it going to take to get number 1? What's it going to take to get number 2? Blah, 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 et cetera, up to number 5. Let's be honest. If you're not making that phone call, then you're kind of not really doing your GM job, right? Because there may be a player that move a little bit of draft capital to get up there. And, hey, look, you got to inquire. You got to find out what the package is. So, look, Peters is going to take all those phone calls. Peters is basically going to say, hey, look, we're not moving out of 2. It's going to take a king's ransom to get number 2, whatever. So that kind of goes back to who we're drafting and where, right? I still think that Jaden Daniels fits the best in the Kingsbury system. Daniels is, they had the pro day for, McCarthy. And, yes, Washington sent their, management and scouting contingent up there, rightfully so. I think you're going to see that with almost every quarterback in the draft this year, whether it's the top three that we just talked about in Williams, Daniels, or Drake May out of North Carolina. Whether or not they go to McCarthy's pro day, which they did, more than likely, I would not be surprised if they go to Bo Nix's pro day out in Oregon, or even Michael Penix, as crazy as that sounds. To his pro day, even though, there's a lot of injury issues. One of the things that's interesting, I kind of read today, I think it was today/yesterday, about JJ McCarthy, was he is now getting the stock rise, the comparison. It's, you hate to say this or even compare it to this guy, but they were comparing him to the Zach Wilson before Zach Wilson became an NFL pro, right? Zach Wilson was really good in college, played good his senior season, wasn't really high in the draft stock 2 months before the draft, but then miraculously something happened that, pushed Zach Wilson high. And, we're kind of seeing the same things now with JJ McCarthy. Now, is McCarthy on the same level as Zach Wilson? Might be better, might be the same. Who knows? It's kind of going to be the system that he goes into. Excuse me. But I just can't see us taking number 2 pick on JJ McCarthy. I think he's going to drop to at least maybe the Patriots like him. Maybe somebody else takes him, whether he goes to Minnesota trades up, whether or not he goes to the Giants, whether he goes to some of the other, the Raiders. It kind of all depends. So there's a handful of teams that need quarterbacks. I just don't think he's the right fit for us here in DC. Not many people in the DC market are jumping on a JJ McCarthy train yet. It's still the battle between Jaden Daniels and Drake May, so to speak. Now, that's not to say that, McCarthy as a dark horse comes up and, for whatever reason, really wows and impresses Kingsbury, Quinn, and Peters. But right now, I'm just kind of not seeing that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. So, as we go in, talk about our free agency period that, we're knee deep 2.5 weeks into here in 2024. The first thing I want to do is kind of look at the long list of guys that we didn't re-sign. Before I talk about all the guys from around the league that, we were able to bring in, whether it's starters, whether it's depth guys or stuff like that. So, the question is, who did we not re-sign? And the list was long, and, let's just go right down the list, right? So I'm going to save the first 3, mainly because they all signed deals somewhere else, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But, so look, we'll start off the list with running back Antonio Gibson. It's kind of interesting because he had some ball handling, fumble issues last season, kind of in some key moments. I think he only had 6 fumbles for the season, which doesn't really sound like a lot, but when they come at kind of inopportune moments of the season, in big moments in the game, or, to kill drives or whatever, it kind of seals your deal, right? But Antonio Gibson actually, did not get re-signed by Washington, picked up a deal with the New England Patriots to be their running back. Not sure of the years, not sure of the terms, but I just know that he's going to the Patriots, right? Next up was basically backup / supposed to be starter before he got hurt, quarterback Jacoby Brissett. I was kind of hoping that they would re-sign him, even if it was only a 1-2 year deal, knowing that, hey, we were going to have that veteran backup presence again. Kind of, look, when he came in and did what he needed to do last season in place of Howe, he did really well in the same offense that Howe was in under EB. But, we knew that Brissett, or at least I knew Brissett, wanted that starting quarterback job somewhere, at least wanted a better competition for that opening starting quarterback somewhere, and he took it, right? So I can't blame him. Went, signed a contract. Pretty sure it was back with New England again. And kind of went from there. The next batch, we kind of knew we were going to clean house from the offensive line era of our team from last season, as well as kind of some defensive end stuff too, right? So in no particular order, look, we did not re-sign center Tyler Larsen. out of the guards and tackles and even the center, I kind of thought Larson might be retained if on, kind of a team friendly deal, 1 year deal, whatever. But it kind of just was the way it worked out, and we didn't sign Larson, right? Defensive end Casey Toohill. I thought after the trades of Montez Sweat and Chase Young, Toohill kind of stepped up along with the next guy, defensive end James Smith Williams. And, I thought they were going to sign both of those guys, if not to be projected as in like competing for the starting edge positions, just depth guys for us because they did fairly decent. Look, they're not Bosa's, they're not TJ Watts, but they're a level below and they can play, and they showed that they can play in the NFL. But Toohill went and signed with Buffalo. Smith Williams actually re-signed with us, that we're going to talk about in a second. Defensive end Obata. And then it kind of gets funky, but look, we didn't re-sign Sadiq Charles, we didn't re-sign Lucas. Defensive tackle Abdullah Anderson, nope. Cody Barton did not get re-signed either. He went and signed a deal with somebody else, I forget who. Khaleke Hudson actually did fairly decent at middle linebacker. Thought they might bring him back. Always a possibility that they still might do that because he's not signed anywhere. Linebacker David Mayo, wide receiver Byron Pringle, who actually came over from Kansas City with EB. A fullback Alex Arma, who was basically like special teams practice squad dude. Safety Terrell Burgess, kicker Joey Sly. We didn't re-sign. We kind of knew there's probably like a 50-50 of whether he was going to go in to still being our kicker next season, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes, because obviously it ended up that he's not. The last three, which were kind of interesting, one of which I really thought we were going to re-sign, but for whatever reason, it just didn't fit Joe Witt and Dan Quinn's defensive system and scheme, was Cam Curl. Cam Curl was, looking for a big bag of money. Let's be honest. It kind of is what it is. He ended up going out and signing a 2 or 3 year deal with Seattle for way less than the franchise tag, on a deal that I thought, the Commanders could have easily matched if they really wanted to. But there was an article that came out in Bleacher Report and then verified by team insider JP Finley 1067 The Fan that said basically the Commanders never even offered a contract to Curl. And that was based on the fact that, as I just said a couple of seconds ago, apparently they didn't like the fit of him in Witt and Quinn's new defensive system. But Curl really shined for us the last couple of years, especially last year. So I was actually kind of really surprised, that they couldn't utilize him some way in our system, in our defensive scheme. Cornerback Kendall Fuller, we kind of knew he was going to be a salary cap casualty in free agency. And, look, whether you want to say, hey, he doesn't fit the defensive scheme, he was too expensive, too old, whatever, didn't come back. And then last but not least, wide receiver Curtis Samuel. We kind of knew that, hey, look, when we got McLaurin and Dotson as kind of our number one, number two, and whether or not we draft or pick up a free agent guy to be number two, X receiver, number three, kind of leaves Samuel on the way out. Curtis Samuel actually went and signed a contract with somebody else. So it kind of leaves a wide receiver opening as well, right? So then it kind of becomes, well, who did we sign off this list? And before we get to the big free agency hits, we got to talk about who did we sign off this list. So we did sign, or should say re-sign, safety special teams guy Jeremy Reeves, who's been actually pretty phenomenal, kind of as a depth secondary guy, as well as big on special teams. He's been a 2-time Pro Bowler in the last 2 years for us. We did sign Smith Williams for depth on the defensive end side. Looking down that list, we did re-sign wide receiver return specialist Jamison Crowder for us. So that'll be nice to have a little familiar face that comes back in. And in all honesty, like that's pretty much it, right? 3 to 4 guys off that list of like 20. So then it's like, well, holy cow, like we got a lot of holes to fill, right? So then the magical question becomes, well, who did we sign in free agency? And sure enough, man, I'll tell you what, in that tampering period of like 48 to 72 hours that each team has before the league year officially starts on Wednesday, March 15th, it's kind of when like teams are negotiating deals, kind of announce them, but they don't become official till the league year starts, yada, 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 yada. There was some talk about how aggressive the Commanders would be. Are we going to, do a bunch of guys? Some of the big things that came out that kind of, so fans saw, I'll back up real quick, right? Fans, figured we're going to get splashy in the new season, in the first new off season of the new ownership group, Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, etc. Right, a couple flashy signings in free agency. You got the cap space, you got the new management, you got the new ownership group. Let's get some flashy guys. Adam Peters actually came out like 24 hours before free agency started and said, "Hey, look, so here's the deal. Here's how this is going to work. We're not doing anything flashy. We're not going out and spending all of our cap money in free agency. There's a plan, there's a system, there's a way we're doing stuff, and like you basically got to trust the process." So a lot of fans just, want the shiny new car, the brightest and best new toy, like that kind of deal, right? And while there's some good names and some good fillers that are basically going to be plug in now and you're starting, you didn't really get a bunch of the flashy free agents that are out there. Now, there's still some out there in certain positions of which we need. We're going to talk about what positions, we still have holes in or what I feel we need to fill yet, whether it's through the draft or, continuous for free agency. But we'll see what happens, right? And so the first one that was announced was actually kind of interesting, with the Dan Quinn, Joe Witt, and some of the other Cowboy coaches coming over from Dallas to Washington this season, was the Commanders were signing former Cowboys center Tyler Biadasz. So, right away that says, hey, look, we're not re-signing Tyler Larsen. Biadasz is going to be basically, unless something happens, opening week starting center on the new offensive line. So, it was super interesting that, look, the biggest thing that I got to say about Biadasz, and, look, he's coming from the rival Cowboys. Not a big fan of that, whatever. But I got to give props to the guy because in the last 3 seasons in Dallas, Biadasz only missed 2 starts. So what does that mean? Hey, look, basically in the last 50 games over the last 3 seasons, this guy's only missed 2. So he's really durable, right? He's only 26 years old, has 53 NFL starts already. And, basically he's the guy that's going to be tasked with calling the protections, adjustments, at that center position, if and when, in fact, we do draft a rookie quarterback who ends up being the starter for us, right? So, I feel like that's a solid pickup in free agency to start off our free agency frenzy going into that route, right? So the second announcement that came out for free agency, as luck would have it, we're like, holy crap, like here we go again, another former Dallas Cowboy, was Dorance Armstrong, 26-year-old linebacker, basically like edge guy. He knew and thrived in Dan Quinn's defense in Dallas, which I think was, a huge part of why we brought him over, knowing the fact that, hey, look, we may or may not be re-signing the second string guys who ended up playing first string as a result of Chase Young and Sweat leaving. So we got some holes to fill. And, hey, look, it's just the way, things are going that, we need those positions filled, and this was the next one up. So, Dorance Armstrong Jr. coming over, it isn't earth shattering. It's not going to change the world and move mountains, but it makes sense. Didn't break the bank, and it should be interesting that we can do basically like a team friendly deal with Armstrong, get him in the office and kind of go from there. So good pickup, I think. And we'll see what happens. Next free agent signing, we're kind of like, hey, there's a little bit of a lull, a couple hours. First day's still not over. And lo and behold, towards the afternoon, almost to the end of the first day one, Washington Commanders announced, hey, look, we are signing free agent linebacker Frankie Luvu to a 3-year, $36 million max deal to play linebacker. It's actually huge for us, mainly because, not quite sure if we're re-signing Hudson. There was a lot of talk and actually, confirmation here, like on day 2, that Cody Barton wasn't coming back. Still, the judge and jury is out on Jamin Davis, former first-round draft pick, who's going into his 5th season or about to go into 4th season, to get his decision on his 5th-year option. Whether he's going to be slated at middle, whether he's going to be moved to the outside, whether they're going to keep him after his rookie deal, blah, 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 blah. But this kind of shores up or helps shore up our linebacking position by bringing Frankie in from Carolina. Him and Brian Burns who got traded to the New York Giants during the beginning of free agency. Those two guys together were actually a really formidable duo in the middle for Carolina last season, kind of one of their only bright spots for an otherwise dismal season. So I think, overall we did do pretty well with signing Frankie as a linebacker, right? So, look, then it's like, it was interesting because I thought we were kind of going to be done, maybe a couple more on day 1. And right before day 1 was over, the Commanders came out and said, hey, oh, by the way, we just signed. Let me back up. So it's actually interesting because we knew that Antonio Gibson had already left day 1 to go to the Patriots. So now we're like, hey, look, we got Brian Robinson, we got Rodriguez. Rodriguez isn't quite RB number 2 material, solid number 3. Could be a good mix for B Rob when he's not gonna, when he needs a break. You need a better running back out of the backfield, that kind of deal. But the Commanders go ahead and announce that, oh, by the way, we just signed a 2-year deal worth up to $11.4 million with former Los Angeles Chargers running back Austin Ekeler. Look, let's be honest. I mean, yeah, the dude's into year number 8 in the league, and we're going to talk about him here towards the end of the show and why he made the decision to come to DC. We got some inside scoop that was published, I think, in Bleacher Report, why he made that decision to come from Los Angeles over here. It's on a 2-year deal. A lot of these deals that were signed with free agency with the free agents a lot of them were 1s, some of them were 2s. Frankie's was 3, which was kind of nice, but a lot of them were short-term deals. And this one was 2. So it's kind of interesting, hey, look, Austin goes out there and has another stellar season like some of the ones that he put up in LA. I would not be surprised if they extend him. If he goes out there and shits the bed, then, hey, look, we do a 2nd year, and then we're kind of starting to look at, draft, free agency, somebody to replace him, blah, 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 blah. But we got Austin Ekeler from the Chargers, and, it's kind of great to see that happening. One of the very first, actually, I forgot as I'm kind of looking at the notes, scrolling through my screen here to talk about free agents, was, former Philadelphia Eagles, Arizona Cardinals tight end Zach Ertz was actually the first free agency announcement for the Washington Commanders. The Commanders signed him on the 1-year deal, knowing that twofold. Look, basically it's just he very well could be tabbed as the opening week starter at tight end for the Washington Commanders. Knowing we had Logan Thomas, who was a sure veteran. The problem with Thomas was he was not very cap friendly going into the season for his position. He's getting older, but more importantly, couldn't stay on the field. So he is basically a la Jordan Reed 2.0. So Jordan Reed is, Commanders fans will remember, was a really good tight end, had a bunch of concussion issues and some other injuries that basically kept him off the field. But when he was on the field, he was basically like a mini version of, Travis Kelce or, Gronk or something like that, right? But the problem is he just couldn't stay on the field. And now we're running into that problem with Logan Thomas, torn ACL 2 years ago. This past season, some knee issues and a back problem. Only played in like 50% of the games, blah, 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 blah. So I could honestly see when they didn't re-sign him, actually cut him to save cap, didn't restructure, kind of just let him go. So Zach Ertz kind of makes sense, right? It's a 1-year deal, gets that veteran presence into the locker room. We got some young tight ends that kind of need that guidance, need that, perspective from that seasoned veteran to become better tight ends. And I think Zach Ertz will actually work out. Depending on how Cliff Kingsbury uses him in the offensive scheme, there's a really good chance that, you could see a resurgent in Zach Ertz as long as he could stay healthy for us, that he might get extended going on after this coming season. But, we're going to see what happens. So touching base back with Frankie and that free agency signing from the Carolina Panthers, look, he led all linebackers, both in completion percentage allowed at 56.4%, and, completed passes when targeted as the nearest defender last season, minimum of 25 targets. So basically those two stats correlate into, from a passing perspective, how good he was able to defend the pass in a linebacker position and basically, a pass happy league, right? So just to kind of put that in reference, hey, look, the passing percentage that he allowed was 56%, whereas the Commanders allowed a league high 61%, on targets in the middle or the third middle of the field. So, you would expect that with just by adding him in that position, that percentage against the pass is going to drop, hopefully significantly, maybe even more than just the difference between what he did last season in Carolina. As we know, Carolina wasn't, necessarily the best team in the league, and what the Commanders did last season. So that'll certainly be interesting to see what happens. Then you got to wonder, what's Adam Peters cooking up on day 2? Well, lo and behold, Adam Peters didn't really wait, to do a whole lot. So, we knew that, hey, look, we got rid of Charles Leno, we got rid of Sadiq Charles, we got rid of Gates. There's still talk that they're going to be releasing Wiley. But, look, at 27 years old, projected the new left starting tackle, or actually the new left starting guard, stand corrected. And, a couple starts in the last couple of years for Kansas City Chiefs. We went out and signed guard Nick Allegretti. So, look, he's going to jump into that new left guard starting position alongside the guy from Dallas. So we're kind of starting to form what on paper looks like a lot better offensive line already than what we had the last 2 to 3 years. So, look, it's a nice little payday in Washington for the kid. It's 3 years, $16 million deal. He started in the Super Bowl, played the entire game, even though he suffered, I think it was like something in his elbow, like in the third quarter or something like that, played the rest of the game with it. So he's a trooper, and, it kind of, shows the tenacity and the strength that this kid has, because he wants to play, on the biggest stage in the NFL. So kind of looking at, who else did we sign as well? We signed kicker Brandon McManus. So it was kind of interesting because that kind of shows that, hey, look, Joey Sly, whether or not he gets re-signed just to be competition, Joey Sly is basically out the door, in all honesty. Good mid long kicker, but had difficulty on the long kicks, needed to be better on the extra points. And, I guess they're hoping that, by bringing McManus in, that they're going to get better performance on the long field goals. They're going to get better on the extra points, because there were a lot of games over the last 2 seasons where, the extra point was the difference in the game. That field goal, that much needed and easily makeable field goal, was the difference in the game. And, so that's kind of why they brought McManus in and let Joey Sly go, right? So, but they're not done signing people. It came out on day 2 that the Commanders were expected to sign defensive lineman Clellan Ferrell, who graduate of Clemson, came out in the draft as a stud for the defensive line. He came out number 4 overall pick out of Clemson in 2019. And, Las Vegas declined his 5th-year option, signed a 1-year deal with the 49ers this past season, got a little bit of playing time, thrown into rotation, wasn't extended, didn't sign a new deal with them, the 49ers. So Peters had some familiarization with him out in San Fran. He got picked up to come play for us here in DC. But then, hey, we're not done on day 2. We go and sign quarterback Marcus Mariota, former Eagles quarterback, who's basically Jalen Hurts' backup, on a 1-year deal. And, it was kind of interesting because at that point in time, we then traded Sam Howell to Seattle. And with Mariota and basically Jake from State Farm, from Georgia, being the only 2 quarterbacks on the team, it kind of led a lot of people to believe that, hey, look, at that point in time, we're definitely taking a quarterback at number 2 in the draft. So, only having Mariota, they're like, hey, that he's not going to be the long-term or even long season for this year, starting QB. So there's a lot of talk, hey, look, are we taking tackle? Are we taking, best available after Caleb Williams in, Marvin Harrison Jr. or Neighbors or somebody else or one of the offensive lineman studs that are coming out? And once we signed Mariota and basically traded Sam Howell to Seattle, they kind of basically said, hey, look, regardless of who the quarterback is, we're taking a quarterback at number 2. It kind of further solidifies that I don't see us trading down in the draft to get a quarterback. Like, we're going to be selecting a quarterback at number 2. It's just a matter of who it's going to be minus Caleb Williams. So that'll be interesting. One of the things that was super interesting, actually, before I get to that, we'll keep going off with a little bit more names. Dante Fowler Jr. signed with the Washington Commanders 2 as an edge guy. One of the things that was super interesting, Cameron Cheeseman, who had some severe difficulties as our long snapper last year. God forbid, I don't know how. Long snapping is probably the easiest position in the world to play in the NFL. With a little bit of practice, I feel like I could sign the league minimum and go out there and long snap for the Commanders. They canned his butt and signed Tyler Ott to a 3-year deal, which actually reunites him with special teams coordinator Larry Izzo. They both work together in Seattle. So I kind of feel comfortable with that pickup, knowing that, hey, look, it's not a brand new dude. He's got a relationship with, what is now the new special teams coordinator. And hopefully, as dumb as it sounds, it solidifies another position on special teams, just like McManus does with kicking, that, between McManus, Ott, and Tress Way, who's been a solid punter for us year after year, that, basically we put a good pillar together for special teams. And it'll be super interesting to see what happens. Just when we thought that, Peters might be winding down in our free agent frenzy, they go and sign former Panther safety Jeremy Chinn, to play in the secondary. Kind of at that point in time, Cam Curl had not signed his deal in Seattle yet. So there's a lot of talk of pairing Cam Curl and Chinn together because Kendall Fuller signed his deal with Miami. But, as we kind of know, the Cards just didn't play that way, and Cam Curl went elsewhere. So Chinn is definitely going to be one of the 2 starting safeties for the Commanders in 2024. So, look, in the first 2 days of the free agent frenzy, the Commanders signed 11 free agents, being Zach Ertz, Armstrong, Biadasz, Frankie Louvu, Austin Eckler, McManus, Allegretti, Clellan Ferrell, Mariota, Dante Fowler, and Tyler Ott. Actually missing off that list is also Chinn, so that would make number 12. And, so they're busy and they weren't spending a lot of money, which was kind of super nice, right? So kind of knowing what that we were revamping our offensive line, so to speak, projectedly, at least for now, the interior of that offensive line for 2024 is going to look like something like, Tyler Biadasz from Dallas as the starting center, Nick Allegretti from Kansas City as the left guard, and the stud Sam Cosmi, who's still on his rookie deal, who only allowed 1 sack in the last 300 or 736 snaps over the last how many seasons for the Commanders, who's kind of been one of the only shining stars in all of our offensive line crappiness, right? So now we just got to get a right tackle and a left tackle, most important, and we'll see what happens. So, a lot of movement, right? And it was interesting that, we still quite weren't done. So the next announcement that kind of came out from Peters, and like I said, got that veteran presence of what we needed, was we went out and signed former Seattle Seahawks perennial Pro Bowler and All Pro Bobby Wagner. It was only a 1-year deal. Kind of disappointed in that, but Dan Quinn and Wagner worked together out in Seattle when he was part of the top 5 defense with the Seattle Seahawks when Quinn was out there as their defensive coordinator. So, like I said, between Frankie and Bobby, and even possibly Jamin Davis has the opportunity to now take those 2 guys and literally become the linebacker that we drafted and what we needed him to be when we drafted him. If he can't become a good to upper good level linebacker with Bobby Wagner and Frankie in the linebacking meeting room, don't extend the kid, let him play out his rookie deal and we go somewhere else. There's a lot of experience, a lot of good ability that, there's no reason Davis cannot become, just as good as Wagner and Frankie this year in that linebacking room with those 2 guys now on the team. And as I alluded to earlier, Sam Howell got traded to Seattle. We gave Seattle Howell and a 4th round pick and a 6th round pick. We got another 3rd rounder and a 5th rounder. So for those of you keeping track, we now have number 2. We have 2 number 2s, 3 number 3s. I don't think we have any 4s, and we got 3 5s in this year's draft. So, we're definitely picking up some capital to kind of see what happens, right? And kind of go from there. We also picked up former Chargers cornerback Michael Davis, kind of add some more depth, possible starting potential into the secondary. I think it's going to be more depth. We signed Noah Igbenati from Miami, the cornerback. I think he certainly has the potential to be starting, depending on how they work with or see Emmanuel Forbes, Ben St-Juste, and kind of those guys. But he'll definitely be in the mix. He'll definitely get some playing time, whether or not he might be playing more. The guy from Noah from Miami might be playing more of the nickel pack, right? To kind of see what happens there. But, definitely interesting to see what happens. So for those of you keeping track, free agency signings, as I said, hey, look, we did Wagner, we did Chin, we did Biadasz, we did Armstrong, we did Eckler, Farrell, Allegretti, Mariota, Ertz, McManus, Dante Fowler Jr., Tyler Ott, Michael Davis, Noah Igbenati, Anthony Pittman, linebacker, pick up for more depth. And we still got a lot of work to do. So it's just a matter of, whether or not that becomes, tackled in the draft, and you're kind of expecting to look, number 2 is going to start. The 2 second-round picks are going to start. If we keep them or kind of trade up into the latter end of the first round and get another impact player. But, they're going to expect the first 3 to 4 picks to start this year to fill those much needed gaps. And before we get to basically the salary cap implications of all these guys, we're going to hit our sponsors here at Out of the Box Sports Entertainment. First up is Jason Fine, attorney Big Al, at 1-800-HURT-123. Specializes in motor vehicle accidents, slips and falls, workers' comp, personal injury claims. 3 convenient office locations located throughout Pennsylvania and New Jersey. 1 in Philadelphia, 1 in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, 1 in Pittsburgh, PA. That's Jason Fine, great guy. aka attorney Big Al, doesn't collect unless he wins. Glad to help anybody out with any legal advice or representation. Contact Jason Fine at 1-800-HURT-123. Monkey Cult Coffee, the evolution of flavor infused coffee. Use promo code OOTB Sports at monkeycultcoffee.com for your online discount. Got a lot of great flavors in coffee of the bourbon chocolate chip, toasted coconut rum, as well as the new barrel aged honey to go with it. And their newest coffee flavor, the honey agave. So jump on to monkeycultcoffee.com, the evolution of flavor infused coffee. Use that promo code OOTB Sports for your online discount. All right. About 3 more things before we wrap up tonight's episode. First, we're going to talk about the cap hits, which is kind of interesting because we knew that going into free agency, Washington started out with like 92, 93 million in free agency spending, or cap room for free agency spending. And it's super interesting that, even as the show airs tonight, we still have like 52 million or something like that. Now, you got to keep in mind that 9 to 10 million of that is going to go to this year's rookie class. Might even be slightly more because we have so many draft picks, depending on if we keep all of those draft picks and select players with them, or whether we kind of bundle them up, trade some to move around, move down, move up, something like that. But on the typical average NFL rookie class, you're basically looking at about 9 to 10 million. So like I said, if we keep all of our draft picks, especially the number 2s, number 3s, and stay on them to hit guys, we're going to be looking at least 10, maybe 12 mil of cap space. So that 52, 53 will now go down to 40. But, that's still a lot of room to address issues after the draft, moving into using free agency to fill in some of the holes after the draft, right? But one of the things that comes up is, what did they do? How do these contracts look for free agents? So just to kind of give you a quick overview for some of these cats, look, linebacker Frankie Louvu was 3 years, 36 million max, based off of incentive performances. Austin Eckler was actually 2 years, 11 million max. Dorrance Armstrong was 3 years, 33 mil. Excuse me. Biadasz was 3 years, 30 mil. Nice that we were able to lock up a center for 3 years. The starting guard, projected starting guard, Allegretti, was 3 years, 16 million. Once again, awesome that we can keep starting left guard, starting center at 3 years. We still got 2 years left on Cosme's rookie contract. I can honestly see them doing a 5th-year option on him. So essentially, that would turn into another year. McManus, the kicker, was only 1 year, 3.6 million. Depending on how he does, I can honestly see them extending him or re-signing him to a contract extension as well. And then kind of as we alluded to earlier tonight, Zach Ertz, 1 year, 5 million. So none of these guys really broke the bank per se. They were all kind of team-friendly deals. Adam Peters uses the same contract philosophy that San Fran does, where contracts don't become vested and effective in contract language until April 1st, mainly because of the league year situation. It's actually a really good thing for contract language that he brought over with him from San Francisco and the workings of John Lynch. So that'll be interesting to see how that all works out for us as well. And it's really cool that, hey, look, even after this kind of free agency frenzy, the top cap hits for our team, which in some ways kind of aren't really that bad when you look at after the top 3. Obviously we know, look, position player Terry McLaurin, $24 million cap hit this year. Okay, wide receiver number 1 for us, face of the franchise, not a bad cap hit, right? Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, basically almost together equal. Payne's a little bit higher, but they're both 21 and change, basically 21 and a half each. Not absurd. Hopefully, under Dan Quinn and Joe Witt, they can get back to their formidable duo and destruction in the middle. And then kind of, hey, look, show us that, spending all that money on the 4-year contract extension was worth it. I really believe that they're going to get back to that form this year, and we're going to get every penny out of them for $21.5 million. Andrew Wiley, who's currently still on the team, but there's a lot of speculation that he may end up getting cut if the right people aren't found, is next at $9.4 million. That's number 4 on our team, right, for salary cap hit. Bobby Wagner's number 5 at 6.5. Mariota is the backup quarterback, $6 million. Whenever you can get a seasoned average to good backup quarterback for less than 10 mil, you're doing really well. Mariota is a $6 million cap hit this year. Dorrance Armstrong, who we just signed, another free agent that we just signed, $4.6 million. Jamin Davis comes in at number 8 at $4.3 million. Biadasz just signed, starting new center, $4.1 million. Jahan Dotson, who's still technically on his rookie deal, at $4.1 million. So, probably a third to half of that list is free agents that we just picked up. And like I said, once you get from after the top 3, guys making 20 mil plus, number 4 through 10 is all 9 million and less, which is super awesome. Couple that with what we're going to do in free agency, and it could be really interesting to see what we do and what happens. So one of the things that's always kind of interesting, because that jerseys are big sellers, and equipment, and everybody wants to get the hot player or the new player coming in on free agency, the first round draft pick, which will be interesting to see what his number might be. There's a lot of talk, whether Daniels, if we select Daniels, is he going to keep number 5, who Tress Way, the starting punter, who's kind of been, a fan favorite for years, on our team, is currently number 5. Or is there going to be a switch of numbers? Is Daniels going to get a new number if he gets drafted? Blah, 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 blah. But let's look at the guys that are actually already on the team and kind of go from there, right? So Austin Ekeler, we'll start with him, running back. He's taking number 30. Obviously, 21 wasn't available. Sean Taylor number, right? As we all know in the DC area, kind of sitting up behind me over there on my shoulder. 21 is not available, so Ekeler took number 30 going into 2024. Zach Ertz basically picked up his old number 86, which is actually used by Jordan Reed. I don't even remember who was 86 last season. Obviously, it wasn't anybody important or still here. Zach Ertz is number 86. Mitchell Tinsley, wide receiver, is actually now wearing number 18. Not a bad number, but, hey, Tinsley's going to be 18. He should be able to make the roster, maybe wide receiver number 4, depending on if we draft somebody or even sign another free agent. Might be wide receiver number 3. We'll see. Clelin Ferrell, hopefully this guy becomes a stud, rejuvenated, going into the 6th season in the NFL. He's wearing number 99. Not a big fan of 99 because that's what Chase Young was when he was here, and we all know the debacle that kid was. He's now on his 3rd team in 6 seasons, having signed a contract with the New Orleans Saints within the last couple days, but Farrell's going to be 99. James Pierre, defensive back, is wearing the number that Kendall Fuller vacated at number 29. Michael Davis, another defensive back, is wearing a number that Antonio Gibson vacated when he went to New England. He's going to be wearing number 24. Dante Fowler is kind of going back to his college days. He's going to be wearing number 6. That was held by kicker Joey Sly the last couple seasons. Brandon McManus is going to be wearing number 3, held by wide receivers no longer here in Byron Pringle. Next one is kind of interesting. Marcus Mariota going with the big old goose egg, wearing number 0. And, okay, backup quarterback, possible starter during injury, whatever. But yeah, he's going with number 0, not going with number 1, number 2, whatever, going with number 0. Big old goose egg. And then, of course, Bobby Wagner, who's kind of known, look, from where he was in Seattle, went somewhere else, went back to Seattle. Our long snapper's not here anymore, Cameron Cheeseman. So Bobby gets the old Bobby Wagner number 54. So Bobby Wagner's going to be wearing 54 going forward. One of the guys I did forget in the free agent signing frenzy, not sure what his number might be number 63, since Larson's no longer here, and what this guy wore with the Houston Texans over the last couple of years. But today we did sign Michael Diter, who basically played guard and center, I think it was. So basically he'll give some backup competition to Biadasz for center, some depth, as well as he's versatile enough that he can basically be a backup guard between Cosme and Allegretti. So, hey, we're just trying to do our best to kind of make that offensive line group a little bit better. So, next up, we're kind of looking at, I saw this article and it's kind of like interesting because you kind of wonder what guys think or what their mindset is in changing teams during free agency. And knowing that we're talking a lot about free agency tonight, and this is one of our last topics here, as you see the topics scroll across the bottom, was, why did Austin Ekeler come to DC? And, when you see somebody that's been in the league more than 5 years, in this case 7, and you see somebody that has the potential to be a really good running back because they put up some good numbers at their former team over the last couple seasons, kind of makes you scratch your head, raise your eyebrows, and be like, hey, like, I'm glad to have this guy, but like, why did this guy really come here, right? Like, was there injury issues with his old team? Was there philosophical differences? Is he getting old and got booted for a rookie? What's going on? So as we kind of know, Austin Ekeler played for the Los Angeles Chargers, played for them for the last 7 seasons, which were basically almost all of them largely successful, right? Had a couple seasons that were maybe subpar for him versus the league, but like, the dude is a solid pass catcher, ball runner, that over the last 3 to 4 seasons put up some stellar fantasy points too, for those of you that play fantasy football. So, when I saw him coming in to be part of our running back room, I was like, hell yeah. Excuse me. But, then you gotta wonder, like, okay, well, why did he sign, that 2-year deal to come to DC? We know that the Los Angeles Chargers got, a new head coach in Jim Harbaugh. Was that one of the reasons? The new coach wants his guys and bring people in, which is the case a lot of times, that position player changes are a product of the new coach, the new coaching staff, the new coordinators, because hey, look, like, you're not their guys, you don't fit their system, it's not the best fit, it's not what they want, yada yada, the list goes on. So as part of this article, look, Ekeler knew that following a conversation between himself and the Chargers brass was that he had played his final down for the franchise in Los Angeles. The Chargers came to me and kind of told me that they were looking at a running back, and they were looking at in the running back position. This is what Ekeler said in the article. And it was clear that it wasn't what I can offer as a player, Ekeler said. On his podcast, God Bless Football. So there was a misalignment. There's a lot of philosophical differences between it. So he went on to further say, so yeah, it's like, they're interested, but are you really? Is it like, if all else fails, we'll bring Austin back and type of thing? Because I don't want to be in that scenario. He didn't want to be, second fiddle. Didn't want to be, well, if the other options don't work out, then we'll call Austin and we'll bring him back to LA, right? He didn't want to be in that, and he said that. And hey, look, if that's part of your philosophy and what you're telling me, and I don't fit that, then I've got to go look somewhere else, which is totally fine. He accepted that. It's part of the NFL business. It's kind of the way it works. I had no hard feelings against the Los Angeles Chargers or the coaching staff or the new coaching staff, so to speak, with Jim Harbaugh coming in. He's like, you just want to go find a different direction, one that'll be productive for you. So the Chargers went ahead and signed running back Gus Edwards from the power running back, who played his last 5 seasons with the Baltimore Ravens, behind Lamar Jackson. And Ekeler said that 6 teams were genuinely interested in him at the start of free agency. Fortunately for Ekeler, he found the right team and the right fit in Washington. He said, I was looking for someone who had a solid back that I could really complement, and we can really balance things off each other as far as our production. So he took notice of Washington Commanders starting running back B-Rob, Brian Robinson Jr., and what his style was in his production over the last couple of seasons here in DC. He goes, we're very different types of runners. He's like 6'1", 220 pounds or wherever, and I'm not. He goes, I'm like a little scat back, a little scat speed. So it's almost like going back to me and Melvin Gordon in the days of the San Diego Charger days, right? So, he could say that he's been underrated throughout his career, but as I said, he makes the Chargers roster and puts up, nearly 1,000 yards every season out there. He's basically next to like CMC McCaffrey. He's basically like the most versatile back in the NFL, really, when you look at it. So, the guy certainly still has the potential, and couple him with B-Rob, and you got a formidable backfield. Now, the other reason that I kind of think, Ekeler also came to DC, and it wasn't necessarily per se in the article. As I kind of just look at it real quick just to make sure, because I'm just looking at cursing back over it here in my notes that, hey, look, they wanted a more balanced roster that, largely the voided contracts of Justin Herbert just signed a massive contract extension in the offseason. And they had a lot of key departures from the Chargers and Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, both wide receivers, now Ekeler. Whether or not that was to, help pay for Herbert's, big contract extension. There were some salary cap issues that the Chargers were going to face going into free agency, as we spoke to even signing the rookie class coming out, yada, yada, yada. But one of the things I wholeheartedly feel like this was one of the reasons, even though Ekeler didn't come out and really say it in the article, was the running backs coach that Dan Quinn hired for his new Commanders coaching staff was Anthony Lynn, who was actually the head coach out for San Diego, actually gets going into the new when they became the Los Angeles Chargers, of which Ekeler played for. So, when you have some familiarity with the position coach who happened to be your former head coach, as well as knowing that you were going to try and be a decent fit for the system that you're going into with Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator and being partnered with B-Rob, it kind of just adds up, 1, 2, 3. Here's why it makes sense out of 6 teams to go sign with DC. So, it'll certainly be interesting to see what they can do. So real quick, kind of as we look over it, what else do we need? And I think a lot of these will be handled in the draft. Maybe some more depending on how much they want to spend of the free agency cap space money. But, look, we need the left tackle. We need a right tackle. One of those two, I think, preferably left tackle, is going to be addressed in the draft. We still need another wide receiver. We got 3 to 4. We got 2 solids. Number 3 could be a solid, but, we can definitely have an upgrade there as well. Grabbing another tight end wouldn't be a bad idea. We got Ertz. We got Cole. We got Turner. But, it wouldn't be a bad to try and grab another one, draft free agency, right? But line wide receiver is kind of what we're looking at offensively right now. Obviously, we know we need a quarterback. Quarterback will be number 2. Who that is, that'll remain to be seen, but that's kind of offensively what we need. Defensively, between the guys we signed on the defensive side, I think we have some solid starters at edge. It wouldn't hurt to grab another edge guy, possibly starter, if not rotational depth for defensive end / edge guys. I feel confident in our linebacking core between Frankie, Bobby, and Davis. If we can sign Hudson or re-sign Hudson back, that'd be a good spot, good pickup. I feel like we're kind of set. Secondary, we could probably still need some help with. Look, we signed Chin. He's going to be starting. We still have St. Juice. We still have Forbes. We still have, Stroman. We got a couple guys. Are they top tiered, shut down secondary guys? No. We picked up Michael Davis. We picked up Igbignani from Miami. So I think collectively we're going to have some good stuff. We're probably going to draft high somebody out of the secondary to go into the secondary. Wouldn't be surprised if we try and even pick up some guys that are still in the free agency market after the draft for the secondary. Simmons comes to mind. There's a couple other, 2 or 3 dudes out there, depending on cap hits, projectively, what they want for contracts, might be a good fit. Look, if they could get Simmons on a good contract, I'm not going to throw out team friendly. I'm not a big fan of that verbiage, but if you don't overspend for Simmons, he'd be a good fit. Um, you know, Still got some in the tank, still productive, but a guy that could be beneficial here in DC. So it'll be interesting to see. We help secure our special teams with the kicker and the long snapper, couple them together with our punter that we already have. I think we're going to be pretty good. Right. So, it'll be interesting to see what we do here going forward in the draft, and, kind of where we fill in for free agency remaining after the draft. Whether they even make some trades to go and figure out, how we complete this roster moving forward. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. As most of you know, as we kind of close out our show, I like to look at things kind of semi-sports related. Sometimes it's entertainment related, but a lot of times it's sports related that doesn't have to do with football. Look, we spend a little over an hour plus talking about Commanders football on the field, off the field here. And it's kind of nice, just kind of highlight some things, that kind of, make the news, whether they're good, hard, feel good stories, or, just some stuff that happens that doesn't happen all the time in sports or entertainment for that matter, so to speak. So, we're going to close with 2 things here. One being, I call it the NCAA Brotherhood. Actually, the NCAA Band Brotherhood, so to speak. But before we get to that, I'll give a shout out. I actually found out right before I came on the air tonight that my little nephew, Ben, who's actually a little sports stud, hit a inside the park home run. So I'll give props to Benny for doing that. He's 13 years old, plays sports like he lives and breathes all the time. More sports than I can care to keep up with for when I was his age. But the little dude's excelling in baseball. My older nephew is a stud baseball player too, Chase. So I know they're busy all week with baseball, but Benny hit a home run tonight. So we'll give him some props before I get to my feel-good story for the week. So the feel-good story for the week, as we all know, it's March Madness. And, look, we're getting ready to go into the Sweet 16 this weekend, going into the Elite 8 as well on Saturday and Sunday. But, what would it be without some brotherhood of the NCAA tournament? We know that each region is kind of spread out across the country. A lot of times schools don't play anywhere close to their location in their region, which I never really understood. There's probably a reason for it, but whatever. So without further ado, is interesting because Yale's basketball team was playing out in the West Regional, out in Washington State. I think it was Seattle. Might have been somewhere else in Washington, but it was out in Seattle. So Yale's band, let's back up. Yale's basketball team actually isn't that bad, right? Actually played pretty good. And one of the things that was interesting was there was a lot of memes, photos going around that kind of threw a lot of love to the Idaho marching band that was playing in the same regional as Yale out in Washington in the West Regional. So Yale's band couldn't make the trip to support the Yale basketball team out to the West Regional in Seattle. So when Yale played the University of Auburn in the opening round of this year's NCAA tournament, the Idaho band went so far as to don Yale shirts, the navy blues with the big white Y's on the front. And even go one step further that because Yale's band was not able to attend the opening round basketball game against the University of Auburn, Idaho actually went so far as to learn the Yale fight song along with some other Yale tunes, dressed like Yale in the student section, and played basically for Yale and for Yale's basketball team during that game against the University of Auburn. So, why is this kind of important, or kind of the feel good story? Look, there's not a whole lot of cases where opposing teams, opposing bands, whatever you want to say, will take the time to do what this group of students did for a school that they didn't know, a school completely across the country between Idaho and Yale, and basically support a group of student athletes that were 3,000 miles away, playing in, I don't want to say their first NCAA tournament, but one of their more recent NCAA tournaments, just to kind of support the team that, their student section was unfortunately not able to attend to. So I kind of found that really cool, kind of being a former athlete myself, kind of being a former bander myself. Like I said, that Idaho's marching band took it upon themselves, to learn Yale's fight songs, learn their music, actually dress up as Yale band members, and kind of support them while they play the University of Auburn. I don't think that Yale made it to the 32. I could be wrong. I haven't looked at the bracket lately. But, like I said, it's just something that showed a little NCAA band brotherhood, kind of as I showed that, leading off, for tonight's episode. And like I said, it's certainly interesting. We're going to see what happens to, March Madness as we go into the Sweet 16 this weekend, as, that then gets doubled down into the Elite Eight Saturday and Sunday as we move forward into the Final Four here in the next couple of weeks. And like I said, here at Commanders Gridiron, we're always talking about, our beloved Washington Commanders on the field, off the field, and even some sports related stuff, thrown in alongside. As always, I am grateful for all of you that tune in to watch me when we do it. As of right now in the off season, we're going to be every 3 weeks. So our next episode is actually going to be Tuesday, April 16th. Basically, our next episode, we're going to be hot and heavy into the draft. The draft will be actually 2 weeks away at that point. So, as everybody kind of knows right now, you're in lying season. A lot of false narratives, false stories going out about who's doing what, stock of players going up and down, but, by the time our next show rolls around, we should have a pretty good feel for what our team is going to do at number 2. There's a lot of speculation right now, who we're taking, what we're doing, what position, and so much, so on and so forth. I think we're going to be doing quarterback. I don't think we're going to be trading. Are we going to know that, hey, look, it really is down to Daniels or Drake May? Are we pretty much 100% sold on the Bears taking Williams at number 1, et cetera, et cetera. So, our next episode on the 16th, we're going to look at the draft. We're going to look at what draft picks we have. I don't think we will have acquired any more by then. So kind of what we have now is what we have. There might be some draft trades here and there. Like I said, package some, move back up, package some, move down, whatever. But, we'll look at the current state of what we have. We got, 6 draft picks in the top 110 or something like that, as it sits right now. So we'll look at the positions we need, look at some of the players that are out there for those positions, where they might go. I'm not a big mock draft guy. Don't put a whole lot of weight into those, but look, we'll certainly evaluate the talent that's out there just to see, hey, look, barring, this person going to another team, these are the players that, are probably high on our draft board to take. And it's kind of what, I kind of expect Peters and company and Quinn and, and his new staff to be looking at too. Right. So we'll take a look at that in our next show. As always, there's some off the field news for our team. And, hey, look, for us at Commanders Gridiron, or for anybody that's looking for, that show, follow, like, subscribe, Out of the Box Sports, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. We got great shows every night, every day for your local team: football, baseball, gaming, wrestling, you name it. Check us out. Give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscribe. And as always, it's greatly appreciated. We will see you again on Tuesday, April 16th, 8:30 p.m. here at Commanders Gridiron. Have a good night.